So we're going to be introducing to you what we're calling the Recognized Consultant Program. It's going to be a pilot for nutrient management strategies this year. So we're going to go through the criteria and the process. I'll give you some introduction on the drive for this and what we're trying to achieve. Then we're going to look at what goes hand in hand with the Recognized Consultant Program is the focused review process, and really the reason why we're implementing the Recognized Consultant Program as a pilot. And I've got a few other updates for you at the end. So next slide. So this slide just demonstrates some of the challenges that we have been facing and you've been facing, just the number of submissions that have been coming in the last few years. So this graph, you've got three lines. The gray line is the total submissions, so that's strategies and NASM plans combined. The blue is nutrient management strategies, and the red is NASM plans. I did this from 2010 to 17, and 2010 is significant because that's the year before we started doing NASM plans. So if you look at the numbers, in 2010, and I can't see the numbers, but we did about 450 approvals for nutrient management strategies. You look at last year, we did close to 1,000 approvals for nutrient management strategies and close to 500 approvals for NASM plans. You'll notice in the room there's not 3 times as many staff processing approvals, and then that's really the challenge, is the number of approvals we're trying to process using a similar format as we've done since 2010. So that's really been a part of the driver for what we're going to be introducing next. Next slide, please. This one's just more of an interesting. This is throughout the year when we receive submissions. So same 3 lines. The top line is total submissions. Would have been handy if I used the same colors. Yellow is nutrient management strategies, and the black or gray is NASM plans. So you can see, and this wouldn't be surprising to you, in February we get a peak every year. It dies off a little bit, and then we peak again in the summer, and then it continues throughout the rest of the year. And the challenge is always in February we get more than we can handle, and we just get behind, and then we're fighting the whole year to try to get caught up. So. Again, not a surprise to anybody in the room, but just a bit of an interest. That's three different years. Actually, yeah, that's 3 different years, not 3 different types. It just shows it is very consistent year over year. Next slide.
You have a question? Yeah, can you
2017 challenges. Again, last year was a tough year for us in terms of getting through approvals, and a lot of it was just there was so many coming in, and I'm sure you can relate. You were processing a lot of submissions last year, and we had a larger than expected spike in February, March, and May, and we just got behind, started to get caught up, got behind, and it got out of hand. And the turnaround time was much larger than what we would consider acceptable, and we're getting significant pressure to address it from yourselves, from stakeholders in terms of farmers, farm groups, and definitely the hires up in OMAFRA saying that things need to change. So definitely a drive to make things more efficient. So what we are introducing this year, and the team has put a lot of work into this, what we're calling the Recognized Consultant Program. And really the purpose is to improve efficiency while maintaining diligence in the process. The approval of nutrient management strategies and NASM plans is a key piece of the program. We are approving something that is then there for inspection. It's something that the client has to follow. So it's a key piece. We have to keep doing it. We just need to find a more efficient way to do it. The objective is really to focus our review time on the pieces of a strategy that need time, and not focus our time on the pieces that don't need time. And that'll make more sense once we go through it. So how we're going to accomplish this, a few things that we're going to be asking of recognized consultants is that we get a more standardized submission. So we're going to be asking for templates, we're going to be asking for checklists, we're going to be asking verification of roll numbers, things like that, to ensure that we get close to perfect, clear, accurate submissions each and every time. Yeah, next slide, please. So what is the Recognized Consultant Program? And to back up a little bit, when we started trying to figure out how we're going to address the problem, we did a bit of looking around, and we found that the Electrical Safety Authority has what they call an authorized contractor program. And we had some good discussions with ECA on their program, and if you're familiar with that program, which I'm sure you're not, you'll find that ours mirrors it very closely. It's a set criteria, it's a performance standard that has to be met, and there's benefits of being a recognized consultant or an authorized contractor. So we're mirroring that process, and really what we're doing is it's going to be a voluntary program. It's going to be for consultants that can meet and maintain a set standard. It's going to be open to anyone. It's not going to be for everyone. It's going to be depending on how your business is set up. It's going to be what changes you're willing to do on your end in terms of meeting the criteria, and it's really going to be for some, and we're going to try to increase efficiency overall is what we're really trying to do. It's not a requirement of your certification. You can continue doing what you're doing. You can continue to be certified. This is an enhancement, something that you apply to be part of, and you can become a recognized consultant. We will be removing people from the program if you're if you meet the criteria and cannot maintain the criteria. We will be removing people from the program. It's going to be a high bar to get on the program and stay on the program. It's going to be a relatively low bar to be taken off. Once we start going through it, it should make sense of why it's so important that we maintain a high bar, high accuracy of submissions that are coming in. It really drives what we're trying to do in the efficiency piece. Next slide, please. So, and I should say all this material will be up on nutrientmanagement.ca soon. We've got an extensive program guide that's being developed, which will be available by February 1st, which has all this information and more, all the criteria. Really trying to summarize it today and just introduce it to you to get you started thinking about it if it's right for you. And I'm just going to find the right slide here. So this is the criteria. We've got it broken down into submission criteria and performance criteria. And really, submission criteria shouldn't be any surprise. It looks very similar to what you're used to in the streamlined approach. But what we're looking for is obviously using NMAN, latest version of the overview of the operation template, using the farmstead sketch checklist and submitting that checklist, submitting verification of the roll numbers, explaining all flags that may be in NMAN, explaining any previous approvals that may be on a submission, and asking that you submit a complexity assessment tool, which you'll figure out what that means in a minute. Going back to that previous approval piece, that's a key one that some of you do very well, and we're going to be asking all recognized consultants to do that. And that's really just, if you're the consultant, looking back at any previous approvals, seeing if anything's changed from that approval, and just addressing it in the current submission. So giving us that, hey, yes, I have looked back, there are no changes, or maybe the barn that they proposed was never built, or the barn that they said they were going to decommission wasn't decommissioned. Let us know on that current submission, so that's something we don't need to dig back through and figure out for ourselves. So it's really just giving you all the information we need up front, so that we don't need to dig through.
Just move the mic a little bit closer. I'm just having a hard time hearing you.
Maybe I'll just move closer. Okay, next slide. Performance criteria. So this is what we expect of recognized consultants, and the big one is going to be the error rate. So we're asking a recognized consultant needs to maintain less than 1 error rate per submission. And what we're saying is an error rate. If we are going through our checklist and we have to check no on something, meaning the roll numbers aren't correct or you forgot something on your sketch, that's going to be an error, and you need to maintain a less than 1 per submission. So if you're used to getting an RAI with 1 or 2 points, that's probably going to be 1 or 2 errors on your submission. So to be a recognized consultant, you need to find those errors before they come in, so that we're not doing the back and forth with RAIs with you. That's really part of what we're trying to cut out with this program, is the back and forth. So it's going to take significant work on your end to figure out what you need to do on your end to find those errors, whether it's, again, the roll numbers, whether it's a sketch, whether it's the overview of the operation. Some of the things that we find are different numbers in NMAN than what's on the sketch. So some of those things you're going to need to focus on before you send it in, because it's going to matter. If we need to send you an RAI, that's going to affect your error rates. If your error rate's not less than 1, you won't be part of the recognized consultant program. I'm going to take questions at the end. I got a pretty meaty presentation here, Teeny, so I'm going to try to get through it, but definitely try to answer questions at the end. Some of the other stuff should be no-brainers. We're asking that you attend all update meetings. One of the things we put in here was we must submit 10 submissions per year, and we got this from the Electrical Safety Authority. They have a similar criteria, and it's just all about staying current in the program. Consultants and producers that submit 1 or 2 a year normally aren't the ones that are up to date, normally aren't the ones that know what we're looking for in submissions. So we set a number of 10, and the rationale was that it's not quite 1 a month, but we thought 10 a year is probably enough to keep you current in the program, know what needs to be in a submission, and again, we're confident in the submissions coming in from somebody that's doing that number a year. We've come up with a Quota Practice, which we'll go through in a minute, but again, just really trying to drive that trust, drive the quality. Must achieve any satisfactory on all pre-approval site visits, again, should be a no-brainer. Must not be on progressive compliance, again, should be straightforward. And we've added in here, must respond to all requests for additional information within 30 days. So again, some consultants are very quick to get back to us, some are not. As a recognized consultant, we're going to be asking that consultants get back to us within 30 days. And that doesn't necessarily mean you've got the information, that just is giving us an update on what's going on with the file so that we know it's current and it's not just sitting. Next slide, please. The Quota Practice, and I will take a second to go through this. So when we sat down thinking about what we want in a recognized consultant, we wanted to be sure that when we're getting a submission that we can trust the information, that we've got accurate information in front of us. Again, similar to the Electrical Safety Authority, we came up with a Quota Practice. And this should look very similar to the performance criteria that's already part of your certificate, but what we'll be asking is that you are committing to this Quota Practice when you apply to be a recognized consultant. So number 1, you're going to consistently submit high-quality nutrient management strategies that are clear, concise, and accurate. As a recognized consultant, I will be personally responsible for the validity of all information that's collected and used in the preparation of a nutrient management strategy I submit. I will be responsible and ethical in my professional activities related to nutrient management program. I will not misrepresent or conceal any information or circumvent the regulation, and ensure all nutrient management strategies I prepare accurately reflect the realities or proposed realities of the farm I'm representing. I will ensure the information, professional advice I give is accurate, up to date, follows agronomic best practices, and adheres to legislative requirements. I will report serious contraventions of the NMA and related acts and regulations to the proper authority, and I will submit all nutrient management strategies following the submission requirements. So again, this is what we're asking you to commit to if you want to be part of the recognized consultant program. Next slide, please. So obviously we're asking for a lot from consultants, and if we're going to be asking for a lot, there's got to be some benefit to it. So the benefits that we are proposing or will be targeting is if we can get submissions that are clear, concise, we think we can turn them around in about half the time. So our stated service standard is 50 days. We'll be targeting about 25 for this. No guarantees, but it's going to be less than it is for the standard submissions. And again, that's just recognizing the extra work you're doing up front, and will be less time on our end. You'll ask how we do that. We will have a separate queue for recognized consultants. We'll have the standard queue and we'll have the recognized queue, and we'll be managing them, trying to keep them somewhat half is what we'll be doing. We'll also be keeping a list on nutrientmanagement.ca of the recognized consultants, and it'll be something that we encourage you to let your clients know if you're on the list as a point of distinguishing yourselves as someone that's doing more work than others and putting more effort up front as a recognized consultant. Next slide. So just to try to, for visual people like myself, trying to make it clear what we're talking about. So, is there a pointer by chance? No. Okay. So the...
This is in their package too.
Okay, good. So the first kind of cloud there, we start, all consultants are eligible. Not all consultants need to submit an application. It's only those ones that are willing to do the extra work and can meet the criteria. So you submit a voluntary application, and then the first blue box there is the initial process. So you submit your application, you agree to the Code of Practice, and you include all requirements going forward once you submit that submission. After you submit your application, your next 5 submissions, we're going to consider a probationary period. And this is where we're going to be seeing if you can meet the criteria. So are you submitting everything that's required? Are you filling out the complexity matrix correctly, which is coming? And are you meeting and maintaining that less than 1 error rate per submission? So if you can do that in your first 5 submissions, cumulatively, you meet all the criteria, you will most likely be entered in the program as a recognized consultant. We'll be targeting that half turnaround time for your submissions. We'll be doing a focused review, which we'll talk about next, on your submissions. We will be doing check-ins. We're doing at least 1 in 5. We'll be doing full reviews to make sure that you're maintaining the criteria and taking a close look. And quarterly, we'll be rolling up the stats to make sure that you are meeting the criteria. So again, it's going to be a pretty low bar to take people off the list. It's going to be a lot of work on your end to get on the list. If you fail to meet the criteria on either of those red boxes, you'll be considered not recognized, and you'll be eligible to resubmit in a year's time, but you'll be just submitting through the standard queue if you're not a recognized consultant. Next slide, please.
You can do it now.
Oh, look at that, technology. All right, so I got a clicker now. So what goes hand in hand, the reason for all this work up front on consultants' part is so that on our end we can become more efficient. So it's not only that we're going to be finding less errors because you're checking your work up front more, but we're going to be doing a focused review on strategies that are submitted by recognized consultants. So what do we mean by a focused review? Really, when we do a review now, when we go through it from start to finish, at the end of it, we know where we spent our time, where we didn't need to spend our time. The focused review is asking a consultant to identify up front what are the complex pieces of the strategy, what are the high-risk pieces of the strategy, and that's where we will be focusing our time. If there's not much value in our time being focused on something that's low or medium risk, we're not going to be focusing our time on those pieces. So it will make us more efficient. So what does this look like? Actually, I should look what else I wrote outside. Yeah, and really what we're trying to get to is that high quality submissions by recognized consultants, focused reviews is going to equal a more efficient approval process and faster turnaround times in general for not only the recognized people but also the standard people, because we're not spending as much time on those recognized submissions. So this is where it gets fun. This is the complexity assessment tool, and I think it's in your package. I challenge anybody to read that up there. But what we've done is basically taken a nutrient management strategy and broken it down into about 20 different attributes. And then each of the attributes we've assigned a low, medium, high, or very high complexity score or risk score. We didn't feel comfortable calling it a risk score because some of it is just about complexity. It's not necessarily there's a risk to the environment, but there's a risk that it's not done quite properly or not accurate. So we called it a complexity score versus a risk score. So each of the different attributes, you as a consultant will identify where your strategy fits on this tool. So each strategy will hit each of the boxes one time only. If it's a high or very high, that's not a problem. It's just that's where we're going to be focusing our review time. If it's a low or a medium, that's something that we've identified is not high value for us to spend time on, and we won't be focusing our review in those areas. So just for example, so to start, nutrient units on the left-hand side, we've got 4 different categories from less than 100, 100 to 200, 2 to 300, and more than 300. Farm unit transfer properties, we always need to check the property information to make sure there's no source water issues, to make sure there's no overlapping farm units. That will be checked on each and every strategy. But depending on the number of properties, that increases the complexity of a nutrient management strategy. The number of properties, not sure what I just said. Source water, we need to check each and every time. And from there on out, we will be checking the high and the very high and not the low and medium, unless we're doing that 1 in 5 check-in and audit process. So the next few slides are all the different attributes and the low to high risk. If you look at the sensitive feature wells, that's probably a good example to look at. On slide 15, you can see we've got, again, the 4 different categories from low to very high. The low ones, if you identify there's no drilled wells within 15 meters of any existing or proposed livestock housing or manure storage, and you tell us there's no other wells within 30 meters of barns or manure storages, that's all we need to know. There's nothing else to check there. If on the other end of the spectrum you tell us there are wells within 15 meters or 30 meters of proposed or existing storages, that's something we need to look closer at. There could be a condition we need to add. We need to make sure that there isn't a compliance issue there. That's something we will spend time on. So it's just a way for us to focus our review on the pieces of a strategy that we need to focus our review on. So I do have an example that I'm going to walk through that I think is probably the most effective way to kind of show how this will work. So if you go ahead to slide 18, and I guess I will do the same. So these are just screenshots of what the complexity tool looks like, and it will be a smart form. This is just an update to one of our original forms. You basically click off which of the boxes applies to the strategy. You always click off the most restrictive one if there happens to be 2 boxes that could relate to the farm. And then you would submit that as kind of the cover page of your nutrient management strategy.
I'm not sure they have the example, Matt.
Yeah.
To the back of the book, okay.
Yeah, you won't have the example. This is an added bonus for tuning in today. So this is an example I added just to try to illustrate how the tool will work. So I'll just walk you through it. I've just come up with an example farm, giving you the kind of the information, and then showing how that would look on the complexity tool. So this is totally made up. I made it up yesterday afternoon. This is a strategy being prepared for the addition of a 3rd broiler barn. So there's 2 existing broiler barns. Total nutrient units will be 250. There are 4 properties in the farm unit. There was a previous strategy approved in 2015. The same consultant did that previous approval. The overview of the operation template was used. I just have in brackets there, that's a requirement of a recognized consultant. The sketch is completed using egg maps and the checklist is submitted. That checklist, again, is part of the requirements of a recognized consultant. Here's what the picture looks like. So you got the 3 barns. The yellow barn is the new barn. This is what the sketch looks like. So some of the things to note, I'm not sure if I have a pointer, but down at the bottom, that black circle is surface water, and I've said it's about 35 meters from the proposed barn, but I've also put on the sketch that there's a raised berm around the barn. And there's no wells within regular distance of the proposed or existing barn. There's no surface water there is surface water within 30 meters of the proposed addition. There are 2 existing barns and the proposed barn, so 3 barns total. Manure will be brokered off the farm after each flock, so there's only 180 days of storage. There's 3 storage systems. Each barn is represented as a storage system. All storages are covered. The nutrient loading, I said, is not applicable because it's being all brokered off. There is a flag and end man for the engineering on the new barn, and there's a transfer pad at the end of each barn, and a PVA will be used. So looking at the complexity tool, there is, you would identify that there's between 200 and 300 nutrient units. You would identify that there's 3 properties or 4 properties, whatever I said, in the farm unit. You'd identify that source water protection is not an issue. You would identify there is a previous approval. You've mentioned it in the overview of the operation, and that you were the previous consultant. You would tell us that you use the overview of the operation template. You would tell us that you use egg maps, an aerial photo, and the checklist is submitted. You would tell us that there's no wells that we need to think about or worry about. You would tell us up front that there is surface water within 50 meters straight line distance of that well, so something we need to look at in the review process. And as I said in the sketch, I've clearly identified there's a berm, so it's not a regulatory issue. It's just something we would want to check before we issued an approval. The livestock building complexity, there's 3 or more barns, so that becomes high. So again, in the review process, we would just make sure all the barns make sense, the dimensions are correct. Days of storage, there's less than 240. Again, we would look just to make sure that broker is certified. We'd make sure it makes sense, that the days of storage line up with the transfer dates. Storage system complexity, there was 3. Again, just making sure everything lines up. Solid storage, there's no runoff management to worry about. It's all covered. And the liquid storage not applicable, transfer system not applicable. Nutrient loading, less than 0.75, it's all transferred off. Flags, yes, there's flags, but I've told you about them in the overview. Milking center wash water is not an issue. There is a transfer pad, we're using a PVA. Okay, I need to take a look at that as a reviewer to make sure that everything makes sense. Not applicable for yards and OCAs, and not applicable for treatment systems. So you can see from our end of things, out of the 20 attributes, there is about 7 that we need to look at in the review process. So less than half we'd be looking at in this review versus starting from top to bottom, going through all the questions. So that is what we're driving towards. Recognized consultants submitting in a way that we can do this focused review. We have confidence when we're doing a focused review, we're not missing anything, and it just makes us more efficient and continues to the diligence in the approval process. So next steps in the program. So this is going to be a pilot for 2018. One of the things that has to happen is that this has to be a low maintenance program. Does that make sense? There can't be a lot of administrative burden on our end because that's just going to defeat the whole purpose. So what we're going to be doing is having intake periods for when you can apply. So this year we're saying the intake period is February 1st to February 28th, and that means if you want to be part of the program, you need to submit an application between February 1st to 28th. Doesn't mean you have to submit 5 strategies in your probation period during that time. That's not what you need to do. You just need to let us know you're interested in the program and that you will be submitting all your applications going forward, or at least the next 5, in the criteria that we're asking for. Going forward, we're thinking November will probably be the ongoing time that we will ask for applications for new entrants into the program, and that's just when we start to slow down a little bit, have more time to focus on other things, such as intake into the Recognized Consultant Program. So that's the next steps. You will see everything up on nutrientmanagement.ca. We're just really polishing up the final versions of everything. There again is an extensive program guide that will be up there, which needs to be your first place to go to read through, understand the program, and decide if it's something that you'll be applying for or not. We're not expecting to field a lot of phone calls on this. There should be, we've done a lot of upfront work. Everything should be on nutrientmanagement.ca. If there is something that doesn't make sense, yes, don't be afraid to call, but it shouldn't be a conversation about, well, did you think about this? Well, I'm not sure I can meet this criteria. It just needs to be, this is the program, it works for you or it doesn't. Recommendations, definitely if you're interested in the program, I would submit 1 under the criteria. We'll do our best to get to that 1 relatively quickly to give you any feedback. If you submit 5 and you make the same error 5 times, you're going to be out because that's going to be more than one error rate per submission. So highly recommend you wait for some feedback on your first recognized consultant submission before you submit the next 4, because again, it's going to be a pretty low bar to get out of the program, and then you're going to be waiting a year to get back in. For those of you that aren't sure if you can meet the criteria, strongly suggest you take a try and maybe not apply, but at least use the tools to see how they work and see when you're ready, when you think you've got the quality, when you think you've got the criteria down. In November, when we open it up again, apply then. Again, low bar to get, it's not the time to learn is not when you're in the probation period. You need to have it figured out before you apply, because again, if you're not doing what we expect in the probation period, you won't be part of the program. Okay. How much time do I have, timekeeper? Lots of time. Okay. Why don't we stop here? I do have a few more updates for you, but ready to answer any questions you have on the recognized consultant program.
So I prepare new management strategies for my own operation, and cannot possibly qualify with this program because I don't submit enough in a given year. What are you doing to make sure that this program doesn't adversely affect my submissions?
Yep. For you, there's not. Yeah, so question about a producer that does his own, or a consultant that doesn't do 10 a year, the adverse impacts on you. I'd say there's nothing but benefit for you, because the overall turnaround time is going to be less for you.
Is that actively being monitored, or what's the plan there?
Definitely the target is that it will be less. So last year the turnaround time got well out of hand because we were processing a lot of submissions. If we can pull out the number that we know are done well, and we know we can do a focused review, that's a percentage. We're targeting 30% to go through the recognized consultant. That gives us more time to focus on the other 70%, which is where yours would be.
Any more questions over here?
Dean, go ahead.
Yeah, if you have an RAI, that doesn't automatically mean that it's an error, because like I have several times that the reviewer doesn't understand, for example.
Yes.
So,
Matt, you're going to have to repeat the question.
Yep.
okay, so that is one thing that I want to make sure, that an RAI is not automatically an error.
Yeah, so let me address. Yeah, so we'll definitely be, if it's something we can hold against you, then we will. If it's something that's just not clear or something we don't understand, we probably wouldn't call that an error. Agreed.
And then the other thing is about the 10 submissions, I asked that before, is like a nutrient management renewal. Okay, is that considered a submission too? Because for us, quite often it's the same amount of work, and we have to go through the same thing. So
Yeah.
I know you guys don't look at it as the same.
Yeah.
Repeat the question, Matt.
I will repeat the question. So the question was about the 10 submissions, and would we count, or do we count the ones submitted as a registration, so a renewal? So we have discussed that, and again, this is a pilot and numbers to start. The reason we will not count the registrations, and the reason for that is we don't put any scrutiny on those. Those are basically just received, and we don't want to start putting scrutiny on those, again, adding more to the plate that's already too full. So we're comfortable with, if you're submitting 10, that we've put enough scrutiny on you in the 10 that we're comfortable whether you're meeting the criteria or not. So the numbers 10 to start, and if we find that number's not right, then there's definitely opportunity to address it. We're looking at doing a full review in November of next year to see how the criteria is working. Are the people in the program the ones that should be in the program? Is there tweaks being done? So definitely we've got that on the list of suggestions. Thanks. I should add that that's a good point. We did do what we called some informal consultation with a few consultants. So we called in 6 consultants that do a lot of work, to do what we consider relatively good work. We sat down, this was back in December, wasn't to this state, and just went through with them what we were thinking about, what criteria we had, pretty close to what we have now for the submission criteria, and just got some input. Teeny and Arthur were 2 of them that were there. Gary Van Aken was there. Cleon Martin was there. Who else was there? Merv and Greg Boone were there. And we got some good feedback from the group. The guys actually asked if, Russ, you were part of that too. The guys asked if they could start trying it, and that wasn't something we actually even thought of, and they did, and it's going very well. And I would suggest talking to them about what they needed to do on their end in terms of meeting the criteria. I would say all of them that have submitted have it figured out. And from the comments I've had from all of them, definitely more work on their end, but that work probably balances out in terms of not having to respond to RAIs. So we think we're close, but this will be a pilot for 2018, and we will be assessing how it goes.
There's a comment from the webinar participants.
So comment, a tiered system, putting more work on the consultant with nothing in return. So fair comment, and again, it's not going to be for everyone. If you're not willing to do the work, then you're not going to get the benefit, obviously. Again, the benefit will be a faster turnaround time, and the benefit will be being able to market yourself as a recognized consultant. That's the benefit. And again, all these concerns, very similar concerns, are the same as what the Electrical Safety Authority told us about. And again, we have to do something, and they had the same approach, that they had to do something. And yes, there's going to be some that can't meet their criteria, but the overall benefit is that the turnaround times will hopefully be significantly reduced for everyone.
Are you doing the same on the NASM side?
Yeah, good question. So when we originally started, it's a good question that I'll repeat. So the question was, will we be doing this on the NASM side? So when we originally started talking about what needed to happen in October, November of this year, the thought was, let's charge ahead and let's do this for NASM and ASM. When we started digging into the amount of work, we thought, let's carve this off into strategies to start. The intent is, if this goes well, if we see the results we hope to see, next year we hope to do something similar for NASM as a pilot for probably 2019.
And just a follow-up question, if you're doing NASM and ASM side, could you qualify the 10 between the two programs, or do you have to have 10?
I would say, so the question was, if you're an ASM and NASM consultant, and if we do something similar for NASM, would we consider both? We have not thought about that, so we will consider that when we dig into that. Thanks. Other questions? Are you ready for the next updates? Oh, Ruth?
So in terms of making the process work better, you identified that the consultants need to. What other aspects in terms of this process are there gaps? Because it would appear that you were under-resourced from January to March. And has that changed at all?
So question from Ruth was about, I guess basically staffing.
Well, what other options did you consider?
What other options did we consider? Yeah, fair. So there was so just to slow down. So Ruth's question was what other options did we consider to address the backlog issue, the efficiency issue. We have a plan. We call it the approval direction, and there's a number of different focuses. One of them is staffing. We don't have more staff. We're just committed to making sure we keep the seats that we have full. So that's part of the plan. Some of the other updates you'll see, hit on them, better information, getting some information packages out there. So yeah, we did look at a number of things. The main thing that we focused on is the things that we had in control. We are looking at a few regulatory changes that could increase efficiency. That stuff's really out of our hands. That'll be years down the road. We're looking at technology changes with NMAN, with the databases we have as well. Again, that's probably years down the road. But again, we have a plan that we're trying to drive to just have more efficiency and to at least meet the 50 days that we've stated as our turnaround time.
So there are some other simple options, like one of them is expansion of a simple little part of a building, which then puts it into requirement for a permit and a whole new nutrient management strategy. So it's just an expansion.
So that would be a regulatory. So Ruth's just giving examples of other things we could consider. So that's definitely on the list of a regulatory change that we could make. But again, regulatory changes are not easy and pretty much out of our control in terms of we can suggest it needs to go through policy and there needs to be some will to change the regulation. So we definitely have lists of things we would like to do to increase efficiency, regulatory speaking. But right now, this is what we have control over, and this is what we're moving ahead with. Good suggestions, though. I'll go to the back.
Is this recognized framework criteria, so is that set in stone now, or is that still up for change? And if so, don't you think that the 10 submission per year requirement, isn't that a little bit discriminatory against people who aren't, maybe just starting the consulting program?
Yeah, fair question. So question at the back about is the criteria set in stone, and question about the 10. submission requirement. I would say that the criteria is what we will be moving ahead for the pilots for 2018. And again, it's not saying that you need to have done 10 last year. It needs to be that you're planning to do probably 10 this year. And if you're not sure you're going to meet 10, I wouldn't say don't apply. I would say apply, show us you can do a good job, and show us that 10's not the right number. I would challenge everybody on that. Again, 10's the number that we've come up with as a starting place. If at the end of the year we find that there's a number of consultants that didn't hit 10, but their error rate is 0, those are probably consultants we want to keep on the list, right? So show us that number's wrong, and we will assess at the end of the year. We'll go to Tini.
Yeah, the recognized consultant program, is that based on the consultant or can it be based on the company?
So question from Tini about is the recognized consultant program based on the consultant or is it based on the company? And Tina gave us that comment before, and we did talk about that. And the only way we can see doing it is basing it on the consultant. So it will be based on the consultant. Yeah. I lost the other question. Oh, sorry, Rodolfo.
Just want to make sure not advantage for the producers preparing their own plans. We just hope the consultants they do quickly theirs. So
Yep.
I want to be clear on that.
It's not punishment to anybody. This
When we don't get preference the same as the others, it's okay. So we don't depend on those guys' speed. So
no. So I would say same answer. So Rodolfo made the comment about producers submitting their own, and to be very open and fair, when producers submit a strategy, it takes us quite a bit of time to go through and review those because you guys don't have the experience of somebody that's submitting 80 a year, right? So it's recognizing the guys that are doing, again, at least 10, but there are guys that are doing 80, 90 strategies a year. They've got it down. They've got the templates. They don't miss things. Those are the ones we want to be able to put in a separate pile, get through them very efficiently, and then focus our time on producer ones and other ones to make sure those are getting through acceptably as well. The other option is to do nothing, and then the service standard will be what it is, which is high, right? So if we can cut down the service standard half for the recognized consultants, I'm not good at math, but there's going to be a reduction in the standard queue as well, turnaround time.
What sort of percentage comes through now with error-free?
So question, what percentage comes now through error-free? I would say the average right now is 1 RAI per submission. So at least 1 error per submission. And I would say it's probably 1.5 errors per submission, guessing, but estimating. Any other questions? Okay, I'll do the last few updates and then we can handle any other questions. So I tried to break down the final updates, and some of this again is to try to address some of the issues that we had last year. So better information, so the amendment process. So that 960 strategies we approved or received last year, that does not include probably over 100 or 150 amendments we also got. And sometimes amendments take longer than to deal with actual submissions because we need to figure out what's changing, what's not changing, fill out the form, all those things. So what we've are doing is just trying to standardize that process. We've drafted up a form which will be on nutrientmanagement.ca. That will be a requirement for anybody submitting amendment, which is basically just identifying what's changing. Anybody that's done an amendment, you'll see when you get your amendment approval back, we list off what was approved, what it was changed to. We're just asking you up front to tell us that, so we're not sifting through to figure out what changed. Some of you do it already very well. This again is an effort to make it standardized so that an amendment that's a simple change is a simple thing on our end that we can get through quickly. So that'll be on nutrientmanagement.ca. The other one, mixed anaerobic digesters, they are a challenge for all of us. You know, we've approved, I'm not sure how many, 20, 25, which is not many. And I know many consultants have never dealt with them, which is fine. It's just they really bog us down when we get a digester in the queue, and it takes literally days for us to figure out is it meeting the requirements or not? So we put some effort into basically coming up with a form, an overview of the operation template for digesters that lists off all the requirements and makes it clear if it's filled out, it's being met or not. So being very clear just on what's required and how that needs to be filled out. We've also will be packaging any of the existing material we have on digesters, again, putting it in one spot so that if you get a client that has a digester or wants to have a digester, you've got a spot to go to get that information. And again, hopefully make it less painful on both sides in the preparation and the approval. The other piece, everybody's favorite topic, source water protection. Brittany will be talking to us about that in a minute, but we are, again, doing similar effort of trying to get all the information in one spot so that if you've got a client that has source water implications, you need to deal with it, you've got a spot to go to figure out upfront what needs to happen. So that, again, this stuff will be coming soon. It'll be all on nutrientmanagement.ca. Better communication. So this actually started yesterday. We'll be posting weekly stats on nutrientmanagement.ca. So if you go to nutrientmanagement.ca now, I think there's 3 different pages. On the right-hand side, you'll see a table very similar to this. We do internal stats, and we made the call that there's no reason we can't post them externally. So we're letting you know the number waiting for review, so that's the queue time. So if there's 50 in the queue, if there's 200 in the queue, we'll be letting you know how many received last week. We'll be letting you know how many were approved last week. We're letting you know the number of reviews we started last week, and then the next operation ID to be reviewed. So the hope is your client will know their operation ID. If it's 1, 2, 3, 4, they can go here and see that we're working on whatever 1, 2, 2, 2. They've got about whatever that was, 100 or so in front of them. We're doing about 25 a week or 20 a week. It's going to be a number of weeks before they get there. So just a way to communicate where we are at. This will be, you'll see, I just have the strategy there. Same information is there for NASM as well. And we will be updating that weekly. Question in the back from Ruth?
But you've changed the queue process, right?
Yeah, so, yeah, good question.
Recognized program, you're going to take them out of queue.
Yep. So Ruth is just asking how the recognized queue will be addressed. To start, it'll just be basically the worst case scenario. So we'll be counting the total number in both queue. We'll give you the worst case in terms of what the number is next in terms of the lowest number in the queue, in either queue to be reviewed, which will probably be the standard queue, so that if you're a recognized consultant, you've got a client going there, you can say, these are the stats, I'm a recognized consultant, you will expect a faster turnaround time than what these stats are showing.
So the worst case scenario, and somebody already talked about the fairness of this, is a client could look at this and say, well, this isn't a recognized consultant, I'm going to be in this queue. And so basically at the end, you just narrow down the number of consultants.
Okay, so
you're driving the clients to go towards a recognized consultant.
fair, yeah. So the comment at the back was driving down the number of consultants. I would guess there's a capacity for the number of strategies that people can do. So there's still going to need to be a number of consultants. But yeah, we are recognizing certain consultants. I will agree. Any questions on that? Less administrative burden. Hopefully this is good news. So we're removing the standard producer consultant condition off of approvals. So you'll be used to, I think it was condition 1, that you need to meet with your client within 30 days and within 40 days submit the form. Still an expectation that you'll be meeting with your clients, and still an expectation that your clients understand strategies. We're just not going to be asking that you submit that form anymore. So less burden on your side, less burden on our side to receive them and file them, just less paper going back and forth. The other one, stale files. We've had a stale file process in place for a number of years, which is basically, we consider a stale file something that hasn't had action within 6 months. So that means we've basically reviewed it, sent an RAI, and we don't hear anything. If files are sitting for more than 6 months, we are going to be refusing them. So it'll be on consultants to let us know if you're waiting for information and the guy's got to make some decisions but still wants to go forward, let us know that. That's still an active file. we send you an RAI, we don't hear anything for 6 months, we're going to consider that that's a stale file, a file that's not moving forward. We will be refusing it. So it'll be up to you to let us know if you've got ones that have been sitting that are going to go forward. Let us know that, and we will keep them open. But ones that have just been sitting with no action will be refused. And that's just a function of again, keeping things relatively clean on our end. We have a number of open files. We have files we haven't heard from in years, and we just need to get those off the books. Yeah. And that's it.
You're way ahead of time.
Oh, good. Any questions? Steve Redmond at the back.
Just a general question about updated farm sketches. So we present a sketch if the strategy is approved, and then at construction something changes. So how we send those in, how we make sure the MOE has access. I've run into that situation.
Yeah.
Send in a sketch, but
Okay, so a question from Steve at the back was, a strategy is approved, maybe you're meeting with the client after and find that the sketch isn't quite accurate. You do an update to the sketch. Basically, what do you do with it? I guess depending on what's changed, if it's a simple change that doesn't have any regulatory impact, I would say that's something that's kept in records, and MOE can comment on this. If there's significant changes, potentially amendment needs to be done, then there's probably an amendment that needs to be done. If it's something somewhere in between, it's maybe something you submit, we put in the file. I think that's acceptable as well. But minor changes, I would say, is part of record keeping, and definitely they need to have an updated strategy on the farm. Doesn't necessarily have to be what was approved, but anything that does require approval obviously needs approval. But what if MOE comes to the farm, they need to have a sketch that reflects what was done. So
I guess that's just part two of my question. How do you make sure the MOE has a copy of that? Because in this case, it wasn't the farmer was in non-compliance. There was a catch basin or a well that didn't exist on my sketch, and the sketch they had didn't correspond with the sketches farmers updated.
okay, so a specific example Steve's got about a sketch that didn't have a sensitive feature on it, I guess, and how to get that to MOE. Any comments from MOE or?
The back here is great.
There's two questions on the webinar.
Oh, let me just finish. Is there anything that MOE wants to say on that one, or?
Nathan here, who's going to let him take this?
I think that
You'll need.
if I change, you'll have to repeat it before we go to the webinar. If there's a change to the farmstead sketch, and since the original strategy has been reviewed and approved by OMAFRA, upon an inspection, the farmer should have an updated copy in the field. If the AGIO arrives with an out-of-date sketch because the change has been made since it's been approved, then hand them the most up-to-date one, and we'll start the inspection from there.
So Nathan, program lead for MOE, just said that if a sketch is out of date because something's changed since approval, the farmer should have an updated sketch at the farm. So if MOE arrives for an inspection with an outdated sketch, the farmer should be able to hand them the updated sketch and say this is the most current. Was there a question? Let's do the ones online there. Sorry, team.
One question is, what is a pre-approval site visit?
That's a good one. So question, what is a pre-approval site visit? So we haven't done many of these in the past, but we're hoping we'll start doing more. So a pre-approval site visit is a site visit by an OMAFRA person before we issue an approval. So it would basically be a strategy submitted, whether we're going out to assess performance or we're going out because we don't think something makes quite sense in the strategy. We would do, before we approve it, we would do a site visit and do an assessment, on the ground assessment of a strategy. Do you want to do the other one?
I'll just give this to Janet. I think it's
Okay. How much time do we have?
You have 10 minutes.
Oh, nice.
I still have a comment on that sketch, like for the farm. Like quite often what happens is like everything is done, and then possibly like 2 years down the road, somebody puts in a well. I don't know anything about it. As a new management consultant, if it's a small strategy, I never see that person within the next 5 years anymore.
So So comment from Teeny about the updated sketch. So some of his clients he doesn't see for 5 years, and he wouldn't know if a well went in. And I think, to be clear, what Nathan was saying, it's up to the farmer to make sure his sketch is updated. And I think as a consultant, part of your due diligence when you're passing the approval over is to make sure they're aware that changes to the strategy need to be reflected in the strategy. So whether it's the sketch, the overview, whatever, to make them aware of that example that they could very well get an inspection by MOE and they need to have an updated strategy ready for MOE. Cindy. Not Cindy, sorry, Susan, sorry.
Matt, the second condition that's always on there, past getting the signature of visiting farm within 30 days, is if a transfer is made to another approved strategy.
Yes.
That they must submit it. How is that process supposed to happen?
So not the producer. I'll just clarify the question for you. So not the producer consultant question, but not the producer consultant condition, but the other standard condition we have. So Susan is just asking how it's to work that standard condition we put on about letting us know, and I think MOE know as well, if a farm unit that's been approved is going to then overlap another farm unit, you need to notify us. That was kind of from my understanding, that's a bit of a gray area in the regulation where it doesn't say what needs to happen. That's why that condition is there. And it's basically saying that if a farmer has a farm unit, he's allowed to change his farm unit. He changes his farm unit to overlap another farm unit. He needs to let us and MOE know. So that would be a notification. We would need to make sure that nutrient loading and other things are addressed if that was going to happen.
So would that just be an email, or is there a form for that?
Being very open and honest, I don't think we've ever seen that happen before. So if you have that scenario, we can work on it. So there is no form at this point.
Okay, so just if you make a submission and time that the application sits on the desk, in that time the farmer changes the location of the barn or something, do you have to do an amendment for that, or?
So question from Pat on changes to a submission basically in the review and approval process? Yeah, so we will put this on nutrientmanagement.ca, but an amendment is something that's changing before a building permit is issued. Once a building permit is issued, and if the change requires a new building permit ceases the strategy, and it would be a new approval. So your scenario there, if we haven't even approved it yet, it's just simply updating the strategy that's waiting. If we have approved it, they haven't gone for a building permit, we can do an amendment for changes.
So the amendment is after approval?
So the amendment is after approval, correct. So the amendment is an amendment to the approval, yes.
So let's say a situation where, say, you're delivering a binder to the farmer, and it was a dairy barn and a tank, for instance. And you're going through the binder with him. He says, "Oh, by the way, instead of 100 foot by 12, I made 120 foot by 12." Do you just send in an updated end man? Like, how is there a point in sending that in for approval if it's already built?
So a question from Gary about going out to a farm. They had an approval for a certain size tank, manure tank, and they've built something different. So I guess it would depend if there's impacts to the strategy.
In this case, it would make it better.
Make it better. He's got more manure storage capacity. He definitely needs to have.
You guys need to know about it. You want to see the right dimensions on that.
Yep. So that probably could be an amendment, or should be an amendment.
Building permits already.
So to be clear on that building permit piece, it would be if they built a freestall barn and got an approval, built it, and then a week later said, let's build a calf barn too. I need a new building permit for that. That's not an amendment. That's a new strategy. So just to be clear on that one, yeah.
With that scenario could be just added in the review because, okay, I start building and I run out of money, I make it smaller.
Yeah,
That could be after that instead of sending?
I'm cautious about answering kind of specific stuff up here because it would depend. It depends on the impacts of the strategy. It depends on if that extra, whatever it was, 10 feet got him too close to a well now, that would be an issue. If he went smaller versus bigger, now he doesn't have 240 days of storage, that's going to be a problem. So it depends is kind of the not good answer, but answer. Question online?
With concern with silo runoff, is the process still that a producer does not need an NMS to get a building permit for bunk silos?
So a question online was about the requirement for a strategy for a bunk silo. Nothing's changed there. So the requirements for a strategy for our building permit for livestock housing or manure storage. So if it's a bunk silo for storage of feed, that would not trigger the need for a nutrient management strategy.
But if the runoff of the bunk silo goes into the manure pit?
So Tini's adding to the scenario and asking if the runoff from the bunk silo goes into a manure pit, and what's the question?
What do we got to do then? Because then
yeah, so
it's going to be surface water then that we have to calculate as added.
So so if you're putting something anything into a manure tank, you need to make sure that you've got enough storage capacity. I don't think there's any trigger there for a new approval or anything. It's just making sure that if you're adding something new to a storage, you need 240 days for your manure, and then you're adding more, still making sure you have your 240 days of storage. Is my answer to that one.
One final question.
Last question, Ruth.
Matt, just in the scenario that you discussed, could you give me a clarification? You use the terminology transfer pad. What exactly are you defining that as?
Okay, so Ruth's asking, in my scenario, I used a transfer pad. So transfer pad we normally see in poultry operations where they're pushing manure out of a barn and putting it on a pad. We all know this, the definition of a storage is 14 days of storage capacity. So if you're pushing out a full load of barn of manure, you've got more than 14 days there. We've made the call that if you're just putting on a pad to transfer off for a day or two or maybe a day, we would call that a transfer pad. We wouldn't necessarily call it a storage, but we would ask that there's runoff management from that pad.
So please clarify, I understood that anything that stores manure greater than 24 hours is manure storage. So that's why you have transfer pits within your manure storage calculation.
I don't think there's anything about 24 hours. It's 14 days of storage capacity. There's nothing about 24 hours. We've tried to put some leniency in there for those scenarios because really, if they're pushing out a storage, that pad probably meets the definition of a storage. But our thought is that if it has runoff management, it's meeting the requirements of the regulation. So not making them call it a storage, which could have other implications, but making sure there's runoff management from it. Okay.
Great, thank you, Matt.
Thank you.